Chris, I am like so psyched to see you. I've really been looking forward to this all week. So, how you doing?
Hey Nick, great to see you again. Thanks so much for having me. It's only Tuesday, so the week is young. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, well, it's like it is. It's early part of the week. I tell you, there are a couple of things that whenever while we talk, the first thing I think about is Miami because like when you first moved to Miami, you told me I was poo pooing the whole thing about Florida, and now I'm looking for a place in Naples. So I'm like, oh man, Chris had vision, and I didn't, So
Well,
anyway, how's it
you know,
going? How's it going in Miami?
I would welcome you as a Florida resident, but I'm no offense. I'm happy to hear you say Naples because Miami's full. Like we've had so many transplants move down, but it's crazy. No, the state's great, the city's great. We've actually got a great office here, a lot of great talent. So you're also asking me on a bad day, right? It's the middle of spring when the whole rest of the country is freezing, and it's 77 here. So you'll like
I
it if you
know.
move. It's a good state.
Yeah, yeah. I'm here now, so it's like, I've noticed what I've noticed about here is that like the West Coast is very seasonal. In
Yes.
Naples anyway. So like once Easter hits, it's like Labor Day in the Northeast on Cape Cod. It's like everyone
Yeah,
leaves.
100%. Yeah.
It's like yeah, I didn't anticipate that. But anyway, I thought let's kind of get get to it because I know you have a flight to catch, as well. So I thought what would be really good, like I know your background, Chris, but like maybe not everybody does. So can you spend a little bit of time talking about your career journey? I think I've been always fascinated by it, and how you kind of navigated the industry and to where you are today and what you do. So why don't you take a few minutes and just give everybody a good idea of where you've been and what you're doing now?
Sure, sure. Happy to. And I've been very fortunate in my career and in my life to have great leaders and great good opportunity. But I'm a nerd at heart, or a geek, as my wife tells me I should say. It's a better word. But started my career in software development, realized very quickly that I was not a great developer, and moved over into network engineering and operations. And came up through a whole bunch of jobs through dot-com boom. I'm dating myself, and when companies were, I went through a stretch where I worked for 5 or 6 different companies, and I had never changed a job. And then progressed on that side, network, really sticking heavier network, but operations, data center, cloud when that came about. And then eventually when, I had the opportunity to go to GE, and if you're of my age, when GE calls, you answer, right? It's an iconic company. And I had the opportunity to go there and kind of jump onto the other side of the table and be the chief technology officer. And then eventually the global CIO for all of GE, which was a great experience, wonderful opportunity, and spent over nearly 8 years when all was said and done. Now with G kind of breaking up and moving on, it was time to move on, and I actually came to what was a supplier of mine. And to be honest, I tell the story all the time, and certainly not a very good supplier, which was DXC. But that meant there was an opportunity to participate in the turnaround here, and I felt like it was a great chance. So I joined DXC as the CIO, and then I kind of quickly progressed and became the COO of the entire business. And now I'm president of one of our operating units, which is about half of the company. So looking after that. So it's been a ride. And like I said, I've been very fortunate to have some great leaders and, and great opportunities, right? Sometimes luck is just showing up in the right place at the right time. But it's been a ride. And I like to think that one of the things that's really helped me with is I've really been able to see both sides of the table. Here at DXC, we provide technology, and at DXC, at GE, we were one of the world's largest buyers of technology and deployers of technology. So it's been cool for me to see both sides of it.
Yeah. Yeah, what I love about your career path is that you started, in kind of IT and networking, and then you moved up into kind of that organization, and then you crossed into the business. And I
Yeah.
think actually it was Jim Fowler, I think, who mentioned this, and who was he talking about? There was a woman who was the CIO at Ford that moved to the kind of smart mobile unit at Ford. And so it was that jump, between kind of the executive management of IT and then into the business. And the reason why Jim, or how Jim kind of couched that, is that when you're in IT, you really understand the entire supply chain, and also the business processes that go on within an organization. So there's really, the business, sometimes better than the business unit managers themselves because you see everything within the business. So I think, and you did that, like that's your career path, as well. And I think
Yeah.
that's inspirational for a lot of people, who are in IT, that it's not just you stay within that organization. You can actually move over, into other things.
Yeah. Well, I said I certainly agree, but don't tell the business leaders that because they'll be offended now that I am one. But I think, it's funny. I can remember, I can see her face at Ford, and I think I have the name, but I don't want to say it wrong since we're in a recording format. But I know exactly who you're talking about. And by the way, if it's happening in the CIO world, Jim probably knows about it. He's been a great friend and mentor to so many CIOs around the world. But I think you're spot on. One of the things we used to talk about at GE, and I think GE learned so many things there and such a great place to develop and grow your career. But one of the things IT was really, really proud about there was how close it was to the business. And we used to kind of joke, but only funny because it's true,
Mm.
about that the CIO was really a COO role in disguise. That was kind of a thing you'd say kind of informally within the company, again, within IT, because other folks might get offended if you said it. But then, as we've all kind of branched on from there and some have continued to lead GE businesses as they become independent, that's really never more true. And when I think about my own jump from CIO to COO here, it was really because of that. Because after just having the CIO job for a relatively short time here, you had already seen how does sales work, how does operations work, how does supply chain work, kind of how does HR work, how does all that people work. And you, for better or for worse, tend to have a bird's eye view of where it's working and more importantly, where it's not working. And
Mm.
then, you have the opportunity to fix that. So I think everybody, whenever you have a CIO conversation, everyone's like, how do I become more of the business? I actually think that path through operations, again, I'm a biased opinion because I did it, but I think that path through operations is a good one because it's a very natural fit. If you're doing the CIO job really well, it shouldn't feel like that big of a stretch. It should actually feel like you're just more empowered to get it done when you switch roles, or at least that's been my experience and the experience of others I've seen make some shifts.
Yeah, I think so. Like, I think in the limit, the person that I look towards, that proves that this is a really great, not only just career path, I think it's really just good for corporations, is Elon, right?
Yeah.
So technologist at heart, he's always ingrained into, like, the products themselves, and, usually, I wouldn't say the lead engineer, but he's always got his fingers into it, and he came up, basically with that. So he's always had the kind of the hands on the technology, but also on the operations as well, and the budgets and so forth. So I think that's kind of like in the limit, that we're seeing that kind of skill set, is kind of in vogue now, and is super important to, like, run really good companies. So Chris, you're in that category there, so congrats. But I want to, like, kind of tap some of that experience that you have. So um, Terraform, right? That was a name when you were the
Terramark.
CTO. Terramark, yeah, Terramark, yeah. Terraform is like, yeah,
Yeah, that's the
transitioning a
trendy.
planet.
That's the new software tool. Yeah, I wish
Yeah.
I wouldn't be working anymore.
Right. So, but Terramark was kind of like, a first cloud provider that got acquired by Verizon. You were the CTO there,
Absolutely.
and then you moved over into GE role. So you really kind of knew the cloud business, from both a supplier point of view, and then try to operationalize it over at GE. And I think when you kind of got involved with Onug, I remember one of the first, keynotes that you gave in Manhattan. You were talking about that the it was hard. The developers weren't ready, for cloud. And so while the strategy was a really fast, movement to the cloud, operationally, that was challenged. So I don't want to dive into that topic in particular, but I think when we think about the cloud era that we're in right now, it's moving faster than the cloud space was. Maybe what's your observation of what we might have learned from kind of that cloud space phase, and how that is either preparing for us or maybe not preparing for us for the AI era that we're in.
Nick. It's just funny you say that because I had forgotten that conversation until you just said it, but it couldn't be more accurate. Actually, more accurate, or more interesting in the contrast. So it is really funny, and again, we're all dating ourselves when we say this, but the adoption of AI in cloud, eerily similar in terms of it's the hype cycle, everybody's moving it. If there was a portion in cloud, you were seeing clouds on Super Bowl commercials, right? So every
Yeah.
similar to AI, people don't even know what it is. We're asking about it. The couple key differences I would say is one is the speed at which AI, if we thought cloud was fast, AI is 10x. So yes, it's the
Mm.
same cycle if you charted it out, but the intervals are way smaller. I mean, just think 3 years ago, no, my daughter this morning was telling me about how the teacher now makes them do video presentations so that way they can't use ChatGPT. So,
Ah. Mm.
3 years into cloud, my daughter wasn't talking about cloud. So the speed at which AI has taken over the world and is moving way faster than cloud. But to that developer comment, I think and there's a lot of lessons learned that we can go into them, but on the developer one specifically, it's really interesting because that was the case when cloud first came along. You had traditional developers, traditional infrastructure people who were trying to operate in this cloud world. They were kind of almost getting pushed into cloud. From my perspective and our perspective here at DXC, it is the polar opposite. You actually have the use case and the users and the developers, even though I'll argue the definition of that word is changing, sucking forward everybody else to catch up with them. So it's
Ah.
kind of the reverse challenge. It's right. How do you make
Mm.
sure that everything there is in terms of running a great AI infrastructure and using AI properly can keep up with the demand of my daughter who's about to enter the workforce and knows how to use it?
Wow.
And I
Mm.
think it's a couple of years away from entering the workforce, so you're all safe. But
Mm.
so I think the two differences are speed, and then that user acceptance is it's polar opposite, and it's so stark and so fast. And that leads to all sorts of challenges for us as operators and opportunities, frankly. But I think that's the biggest contrast from where I stand.
That's really big. So, you're basically saying, like in the beginning cloud era, we actually, if it wasn't for DevOps, I feel is that the cloud era would have never really kind of taken off the way it did. So
Yeah.
we kind of had to like redefine kind of workflow, and how we develop applications and maintain them. But we were kind of pushing, and I think the cloud
Yes.
providers were trying to like really educate, and provide a value proposition of why you really need to do that. Where now, really, what you're saying is that the magnet is within,
Completely.
and it's not without. So it's really kind of it's the response. What IT teams and and other groups are being tasked with is like, hey, we need this infrastructure because we're writing these applications and we're creating this business value. So there isn't that push for it. It's really it's a pull from within to like get this infrastructure in place,
Absolutely. If I
right?
think again, I'm going to date myself, but if we think of early days of Terramark, and Amazon didn't even have EC2 at the time; it was just S3, and we would show people the GUI, which no one ever used. You always use the API, but people like to see the GUI, and you'd be like, "Look, you can create an instance," and it was like eye opening, but it forced a lot of change because it oftentimes be quite literally the first time anyone was seeing that it was even possible. And then they go back to their teams who are very traditional and comfortable
Mm.
doing things the way they did. And then that took a push. And by the way, it eventually did reach a tumbling point where it started rolling down the hill faster than I would keep up, and we are where we are now. AI is
Yeah.
opposite, exactly to your point. It's people who are like, "Hey, I just use ChatGPT at home. Why can't I use it at work? Why is this so hard?"
Yeah. Yeah.
Application developers. I was playing around again with my daughter yesterday. There's an app, I won't say the name, but you're literally describing an app to it, and it's building it. Like you're watching it code real time, and it was pretty darn good. And my 18-year-old
Yeah.
year old daughter's furthest from a technologist. And so I think
Mm.
that's the key difference.
Yeah. Okay. Do you see like then? All right. So that's a really interesting dynamic. That you're seeing. I'm sure you're not just seeing within DXC, but you're seeing across kind of your customer base,
All over the place.
as well. Yeah. I've seen the acceleration, but I think that was an amazing insight. That I haven't seen. So that was really great. If we think that as this cycle now progresses, what can we say about kind of corporate operations within AI? So it's like, so I think, how do I want to frame this, kind of question? I think it's more like many are reviewing kind of workflows, and looking how do we automate workflows, how do we make them more streamlined, where is the opportunity for value creation, what are the particular use
Yeah.
cases. But it seems like there's a lot of discussion going on right now about going back to first principles about everything you do as a corporation, and then what is the operational plan for that, and even questioning all of the system of records that have been put in place for the last 30 years, and looking at agentic as an opportunity to like if you have Salesforce or any of the large kind of SaaS offerings,
Yeah.
they have thousands of features in there. Most companies might use like maybe 20. So can you now develop applications more quickly with AI that really allow you to streamline that operations and not have to deal with that large kind of
Yeah.
enterprise software system? So
Yeah, well, we certainly hope so, right? Because enterprise software is, talk to any CIO and start naming software companies. And unfortunately, they all know the CEOs of the software companies on a first name basis. And that's not because they're all buddies, it's because the bills are that big. So
yeah, right.
obviously it solves a lot of problems, but causes many. I think you're right, Nick. Even if I look at our operations, right, we're complex, 130,000 people in 60 countries, running millions of machines, taking care of our customers every day. That's a tremendous amount of just business process. Never mind the customer operations. That's actually, I don't say that's the easy part, but that's the part we're great at, right? That's what our business does. But how do we actually
Yeah.
make sure all the business process that makes sure that our people are in the right place at the right time with the right tools and the right learning and the right skill set? You know, in any company as large as ours or even way smaller or way larger, it's just the amount of software infrastructure process that feeds that beast
Mm.
is just, it's billions, it's got to be billions, if not trillions of dollars globally. And it really does start lending to your point about first principles to be like, well, what do I need? Well, in our case, we need to make sure that our people have the right training and that they have the skills that they know what they need to go forward so they can help our customers. And you say, well, today I do that by I have a learning management system, I have a courseware, I have this, and the other thing. Why don't I have an AI bot that's just injecting what their learning history is, looking at the accounts they're on, and spitting out,
Mm.
hey, here's what we think your training might be. When they need to buy anything from a pencil to an NVIDIA, to a multi-million-dollar
Yeah.
NVIDIA investment.
Mm.
Think about your company and every corporate person in the world will cringe this. How many people have to go check a box to buy something in your company, right? And how much
Yeah.
value is
Mm.
that really adding versus a bot that can actually make the decision on the fly? So I think the opportunity is tremendous. But I think there's also this real conflict coming up because what I'm seeing, certainly in a lot of our customers, and we've even helped some of our customers with this, do a lot of AI work with our customers, is you have a lot of people who are kind of in the process somewhere automating their piece of it. So I'll take this thing that I
Yeah.
do or that my team's responsible for and I'll make it a little easier, I'll make it a little faster. What I haven't seen yet, and I think it's coming, I just haven't seen it yet, is someone who really steps back and says, okay, from beginning to end, how do we get this? And by the way, it's not that the AI is the challenge there. It's actually, it's the world of corporate process, right? Who's in what silo, who
Yeah.
owns it? Because we as, you know, I'm not an organizational strategist, but I'm sure people study this stuff. We as organizations never built our structures assuming that you'd have the power of something that could see across all of them coherently, right? That's when we designed
True. Yeah.
finance, accounting, sales. No one ever assumed that any one individual would have the power to see across all those cohesively and understand what's going on. So
Mm.
the structures are going to have to change. And I think that, so
Yeah.
that's really the burden to me. The blocker is corporate structure less than the tech. The tech is there and getting better every day.
Yeah.
Now, there's governance challenges, there's all sorts of other stuff, which I'm sure we'll talk about later, but the tech is there.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's extremely insightful, as well. It's like, yeah, we've had these silos in the industry for as long as we've had corporations. It's like you have
Right.
manufacturing, you have sales, you have, finance, IT, and so forth and so on. It is kind of the dawn of a new era, where we can, and then we have system of records for each one of those, right?
Completely.
And then they all get, and they all get kind of aggregated up, for executive management view and dashboarding and so forth. So, yeah, I think that is a wonderful kind of era that we're in, is to rethink what it means to have operations in a corporation. We have the tech there, so how do we want to mold and shape the operations now to deliver better value to shareholders, to customers, create really great products, to be really competitive in the marketplace. I think it's just a wonderful advance, I think, right now that we're just scratching the surface for.
Great.
But I think I wanted to in this too. There's culture, and there's also jobs in the AI era. Let's and Chris, I remember also having these conversations with you about culture, as well. So I know that you're really tuned into that. So how does culture change now? And then also, you were alluding a little bit to how the jobs change. We've been Gene's son, the CISO over at FedEx, and he's been a longtime board member with you. He had this one quote, and I think he attributed it to somebody else. I forget who he attributed it to, so I attribute it to Gene now.
There you go.
And it's that, and he basically said is that AI will not replace your job, but people with AI skills will. And
Yeah.
and that has that has aged really really well, because he said it about 18 months ago. So and how fast this market moves. So where do you come down on in terms of like culture and also around jobs in this kind of era that we're entering into?
That quote is so apropos, and it's. I swear this is going to sound like I'm making it up, and it's a plant, but it's the honest truth. This morning I was texting something back and forth with my CEO because I cut and pasted something I had asked ChatGPT to give him, and I thought he'd get a kick out of it, and I sent it to him. And he said, anyway, we started an exchange, and the comment I made to him was, I've always been a nerd, and I've always prided myself on the fact that I at least understood the technology to do this. And man, if I don't get my prompt writing skills caught up, I'm going to get left behind. That's literally what I said to him this morning. And I meant it truly in my heart. I was like, I can't keep up with these guys. Like I was Googling prompts to kind of have the thing I did this morning. So that skill about people with AI, that line about people with AI talent could not be more true. And that's quite literally 5 hours ago, sitting at this very desk. So I think that is absolutely right. And I think the culture comes back to those silos a little bit, right? If we think about, Ebenezer Scrooge had a marketing department and a finance department, right? It goes back that long. That's going to break down as people with AI skills come in, right? Because if you take a early career person right now who's grown up with AI, grown up completely digital, never known a world where the entirety of the world's information isn't in their hand, and now has these amazing tools to do work, they're not going to have a lot of patience culturally for you saying, no, that's finance's job. Why don't you step back and wait? So I think that empowerment culture and companies that embrace that, and listen, you can enforce your rigid hierarchies. Everybody's allowed to do it. But I think if you're trying to get the most value from your employees and from your team, you're going to want to have to figure out how you build a culture if people don't feel threatened when someone from another team is trying to help them or accelerate, and vice versa. And you really build that cultural thing. I don't know if Amazon still does this, but they had the two pizza team concept for a long time. And I think we're kind of coming back to that. How do you build small squads that kind of move fast? Because the tooling now is just so, rich, for lack of a better way to say it, and so accessible. I think that's the biggest, I didn't say it earlier, it's just that accessibility of AI that anybody can reach it. On the flip side to the jobs thing, 1000%. And everybody thought cloud was going to kill jobs too. And I don't know about you, but if you went to DXC's website right now, I'm pretty sure you'd see like 10,000 job postings, right? We are hiring all over the place, and you can't find good people fast enough. So that turned out to be false. And my suspicion is AI will be the same, at least in the short term. But to your point, or Gene's point, I will give him credit for it. It's a good line. I think that skill set, it's table stakes going forward. It's what Excel and Outlook became 7 years ago. It wasn't something you listed on the resume. It was just something you were assumed to have in order to be competitive for a role. And that's the world we're moving into. The other thing I'll say is and I'll speak for IT people now, because again, I am one. Some of the more traditional IT roles that have been left relatively unchallenged for a few years, some of the hardcore administrative and other roles, I do think those folks are going to realize that their days of being a little island are over, and that if they don't pick up some IT skills, some AI skills, and learn how to merge those two together, then their roles will be at risk. But they won't be at risk because they go away. They'll be at risk because they're replaced by someone who's embraced that skill set.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. That has been a very kind of a silo that has been fortified with cement for a long time, and so and we've been talking about kind of a silo breaking, and I think right now it's not so much of silo breaking, but the silos is going to melt away. And as data becomes more available from all these different applications where they weren't before, where applications can be more readily built because you're leveraging customer data that maybe one application contained and kept in, and so now you can access that, and you can add this whole new range of services to a customer. A silo is not going to get in the way of that kind of stuff anymore. So I think that's a good way to kind of think about this around the culture, is that those silos were also domains of
Yes.
expertise, and they were also domains of empires, small empires like within organizations. So I think getting people prepared for that kind of realignment of the culture, where it's not kind of straight up and down, but it's more horizontal in that in their workflows. I think that's going to be a big deal. That's really great to bring that out. And yeah, on the AI skill sets, it's interesting. You mentioned prompting. It's like at the upcoming in Dallas, we have the AI networking summit, and we're doing workshops. And one of the workshops is going to be around prompt engineering. And when it was first suggested, I'm like, really? You know, prompt
Same
engineering?
reaction.
But yeah, it's a thing. It's a real thing. Anyways, Chris, you should
You
come for that
know,
class.
it's so funny you say that, Nick, because we think very alike. And when I first heard of prompt engineering 6 months ago, I literally kind of shrugged. I laughed it off. I was like, "Come on, tell it what you want it to do. And how hard could
Yeah,
it be? How much engineering could there be?" But you realize when you actually start digging into it and playing with it that there is, I'll say, an art and a science to it. And
yeah,
there is definitely a difference between people who know how to do it well and those who don't. So
yeah,
whether or not, I'm sure many engineers who are probably very deeply offended that we're using the word engineering to describe it, so I won't do that. But there is an
yeah,
art and a science to it, and you can see the difference between good and bad. So I'll leave it at
yeah,
that.
yeah. Yeah, no, it's good. It's interesting because even like my relationship, I use Grok a lot now. I started with
Mm-hmm.
ChatGPT, and I use Grok, and every once in a while I'll be in Gemini. But the relationship that I have now with those tools, I used to just kind of add like one sentence and then see what the response is, and it's like then I add another sentence, get another response, and try to like tweak it. Now
Yep.
it's more of a dialogue,
Yes.
and try to get the final response, and I think, so I'll probably sit in on that class too now. Actually, since you kind of brought it up, it's like, all right, I'm glad we have that class going on.
And a fun
Um,
trick with those, I don't know if you've done this, but if you ask all of those tools what you remember about me, you just use that as a prompt. Say, what do you remember about me? And it's always fascinating to. It's a moment of inflection because it tells you what it has discerned about the way you communicate with it. And I find it interesting
huh.
when you read it. Yeah.
All right. A little scared to do that, but I will.
Yeah.
Check that
Well,
out.
the beauty is you can literally tell it to forget that. So if you don't like what you've read, you
Yeah.
can say, now forget all that, and it'll start again.
Yeah, I've gotten pretty good. Like, hey, delete that. Like
Mhm.
I'll put like blood work, up, and
Yes.
just get its opinion on it. And I'm like, oh yeah, delete that blood work,
Yeah.
document. But
I
yeah.
trust you, but I don't
So
trust you
any
that much yet. Yeah.
Yeah, I will. Like, come on. It's like I don't know, like, who can access that. I'm assuming
Yeah.
everybody can. So it's like, delete it, and hoping that it actually does delete it. When it says okay, delete it.
I agree.
I wanted to kind of shift a little bit towards, kind of politics and governance. Not so much of kind of national politics or anything like that, but it's more like
Yeah.
within organizations, right? So, like in the cloud era, there was kind of the whole data sovereignty, in various different geographies that became an issue, and also a lot of folks struggled with governance models around how to use cloud. There's a whole new other set of issues, around internal, politics, and also around, governance. Have you started thinking at all about those, and what might be kind of top of mind? And as executives start to think through their kind of AI strategies.
Yeah, 100%. It's a huge conversation. And my joke on this, again, only funny because it's true, is it's a good thing that legal is going to be one of the businesses that's really disrupted and accelerated by AI because, man, our lawyers spending a lot of time thinking about AI and they're going to need a lot more time to do it. So I'm pretty confident that every hour of time saved on a
Yeah,
contract is going to go to figuring out the laws around AI because it gets complicated. And I can, doing what I do, one of the coolest things about my job is I get to see so many different customers and industries, parts of the world, and how things get done
yeah,
differently. And this conversation is everywhere. So,
Mm.
and it comes back to what you were talking about before, Nick, is like data. So there's okay, well, if I accidentally feed it something that I'm not supposed to, meaning I don't have rights or a license to, now what happens, right? We could be
Yeah.
29 derivatives away from that by the time we even realize we fed it. And it's like a brain. How do you tell a 15-year-old to unlearn something they learned at 3? It just literally can't happen. So tons
Yeah.
of thought going into that. How do we actually regulate the data and understand whether we have the rights, the license to put on the front side, right? Then on the back side, how do I use what comes out of it? How do I make sure everything from kind of very traditional security data? How do I make sure I don't accidentally pull personal HR records out of it? To more coherent, is this? Did our company just create this IP? Is this really even IP? What is it?
Mm.
How do we license it? How do we? And I know I'm presenting a whole slew of issues with no answers, but I'll tell you that's what I see in all of my customers. Is everybody
Yeah.
has a whole slew of questions, not a lot of answers, and as many approaches to try to come up with the answers as there are customers. So typically
Yeah.
see legal taking a big step, legal being in the front, because I think there's a lot of risk concerns, right? There's a
Mm-hmm.
million plaintiffs lawyers just waiting to sue you for feeding the wrong thing in. But it is a more holistic conversation. And, we're going to need people smarter than me to figure out where it ends. But I actually think, to kind of come back to where we started the conversation, other than corporate culture, that governance question is probably going to become the biggest limiter to it,
Yeah.
right? In terms of speed
Yeah.
of adoption, because people are just, as much as they're excited, they're also afraid. The people who are paid to be afraid are afraid, and they're afraid for good reason, because the nature of the way these things work is that a small incident could cost you millions of dollars down the road. So I think
Yeah.
from that point of view, from a governance point of view, and I think that's where CIOs/digital officers/security officers really do have a role to play, because they do understand the technology at a deeper level, and how to really make it work. And I think that they can help guide our friends in finance and our friends in legal and our friends in compliance, and our friends in those departments in every one of all the 20 plus European countries you do business in, to really help them
Mm.
understand, okay, here's what's real, here's what's fake, here's what we have to pay attention to, here's a real risk versus a perceived risk. Like, hey, that's really never going to happen, but this will. So I think
Yeah.
there's a lot of questions to be answered, and my joke about lawyers notwithstanding, I think that a lot of the law is still yet to be written on the subject, and I'll go there. But I think that the CIO is really a critical role in the middle of that, again, because of that, back to where we started with the CIO COO thing, because of the scope of
Mm.
visibility and the understanding of technology. They can connect the dots that someone sitting in legal, with all due respect, is just not going to have the same visibility to see.
Yeah. Yeah, that all makes a lot of sense. I think what we've been seeing is kind of in that same vein, Chris, and that is like compliance officers and the compliance department, risk mitigation groups are trying to get ahead of it, by putting guardrails in, so that developers know kind of where they can go and where they can't go. Has kind of been like the biggest, um, I think. Discussion point, that
Yeah.
we've been seeing within the community, right? So, what are good guardrails, to put in place? So it's like and we were talking about, kind of I can't mention the name, I can't mention the people or the companies, but someone we had talked about, before we went on video, there it's prohibited to use any kind of public
Mm-hmm.
AI because of any of the data that goes in there. They can't control it and they don't own it anymore, and even the response they don't own. So it's so they're using something that now is kind of copyrighted. Not sure if it's copyrighted, but it's not owned by them. And so
Yep.
until all of that gets sorted out, there's been a kind of reluctance to kind of utilize like public
Yeah.
LLMs, right now. But it'll be interesting to see, as kind of the price points, which one would hope would fall. I think DeepSeek did a good job in maybe proving the open source model out. We'll see if it has legs and if that could be replicated with Meta in their Lambda product. But it would be really great to see the barrier of entry really lower, so that you can actually do training on all of the business logic that's within a corporation. You can have 130,000
Yeah.
people and customers like on every major continent. That's a huge amount of data. If that was to be trained into an LLM, then you might already have done that. But that is a great feeder for like this non-siloed kind of organization just to begin with, to have, all of that data about your customers and about, your own internal processes, available. So kind of, we've been having discussions about build versus buy, and the problem is like, there's only one major company that's supplying all the chips. And
Yeah.
we need to see that more democratized. And I'm sure we'll get there at some point in time. But like right now, like NVIDIA is like just like they are a rocket ship, and they are just they are the major game in town. So
No question.
um, sorry, I don't think I had a question in there. I think that was just a slight
No, no,
rant.
but
Sorry about
you know, but it, no, but
that.
you did it. But you hit on a good point, and I think I will jump on the point you made, which is I think the cost is going to come down, right? It's the nature of, I would say human nature, but it's actually silicon nature. It'll
Yeah.
come down. And I think the other thing we also have to get aware of is just like cloud, just like mobile, just like internet before it, who we think the winner is now may very well not be the winner later, right? I mean, AOL
Yeah.
dominated the planet. And now no one, now it's your mother's email address, right? And I think
Mm.
that, well, they made a lot of money in the meantime, so it worked out for those guys. But
Yeah.
I think if you look at, and our CEO has a great thing when he talks about tech cycles, and he points out that, and he's right, in that oftentimes the early mover, as the industry disrupts itself and drives costs down, ends up not being the late winner. And I think AI
Mm.
is going to be no different. The other thing you said, Nick, we didn't talk about it earlier, but kind of that parallel to cloud. The one thing I'm seeing a lot of my friends and our customers who are CIOs is they've also learned from cloud, and they
Mm.
learned what worked and what didn't around that model. And not to say they're not running to cloud for AI workloads, because they are, but they are also
Yeah.
being way more measured about it. And the decision
Mm.
around what do I want to own, what do I want to outsource, what do I want to put in the cloud, what do I want to put in all those three models, what needs to be on my equipment in my data center, even if someone
Mm.
else runs it, versus what am I comfortable giving to one of the big providers. That's a much more conscious decision in the AI world that I've
Yeah.
ever seen. And I think that's
Mm.
because everybody went through cloud, loved the transformation of CapEx to OpEx, but now has these big OpEx bills. And I think is just being more thoughtful, I'll say, as they move
Mm.
into AI. And it's not like, if we look at our customers, we're deploying a lot of private AI where we have people
Yeah.
saying, hey, build me, Dell or HP or whoever, and NVIDIA, and build me for me. And those same people are also huge consumers of the hyperscalers AI offerings. They're
Yeah.
just being way thoughtful about where they put what. Because again, if you're putting your whole business into the thing, you kind of want to know what the future looks like for it. So I think that change will happen. And I'm with you. I think, listen, what NVIDIA has done is nothing short of remarkable. But humans, at least the extent that it's still humans doing it, are great at taking someone else's thing and making it better. And I think that, like all things, will catch up. And I
Oh,
won't say catch up with them. They'll probably maintain their lead for many decades to come, but there will be other viable alternatives as well that help us drive the cost down.
yeah, it'll be good to have more options and choice there for sure. But I want to close with actually just one question about DXC. Right, so now you're kind of running, very large part of DXC. So how are you managing, DXC to kind of take advantage of the AI era, and kind of what are you doing for customers? So kind of a
Yeah.
sales pitch, Chris, but
I didn't bring a salesman, but I'll do my best job. For us, and this is where I can geek out on it, so stop me if I go too long. But in our business, we run mission critical infrastructure for names every one of you know. We know in public, which means we run at any given moment, as you and I are chatting here, we're running 9 million machines, 9 million instances, server storage, cloud instances, everything from mainframes that are long past their prime to cutting edge serverless cloud AI models. And we do that in a very traditional way, if I'm honest, right? We have all the very traditional IT tools that we've talked about and all the data that comes from decades of running those 9 million machines. So one of the most exciting things for us in AI is not all the, glamorous, what can I do with ChatGPT and all the LLMs. What's actually really powerful for us is how do we take those 9 million machines and make them run better, make them run more reliable, make them more predictable, and
mm,
essentially drive resiliency and security, which is what our customers pay us for, right? So our customers come to us so that their
yeah,
airline flies, their bank transactions process, their surgeons can operate. And so it's a resiliency and confidence business for us. And we think that,
yeah,
an AI bot, an agentic AI is going to be able to understand a pattern in data that no human ever could, and
Yeah.
be able to help us predict failure, narrow the scope. If you remember when cloud came, it went from, hey, the pets to cattle analogy. We're kind of coming
Yeah.
back to
Yeah.
pets. AI is allowing us to look at the whole thing of cattle, but look at them all individually, because now we have the intelligence and the pattern recognition to diagnose the problem on your particular instance.
Yeah.
Hugely exciting for us. That's my side of the business. I would be
Yeah.
remiss if I didn't talk about DXC is actually doing amazing stuff in our consulting and engineering. We actually have an AI business that is
Yeah.
really helping customers develop things. One of our customers, we've talked about this publicly, so I can say, is United. They've won amazing awards for their app. And there's quite a bit of AI in that app that you, if you've flown United, you as a consumer,
I do.
their app has taken home the cake in all the travel industry for awards. And part of that is the AI, the way it communicates with you. It tells you what's going on with your flight. It tells you what's going on. It helps you make decisions. So there's also really cool stuff that we can help our customers on that side. But as the nerd at heart, I'm excited about how do we take agentic AI and unleash it on traditional IT operations to make us more
Yeah.
efficient. And that's what we're spending millions of dollars on that, and thousands, if not tens of thousands of people are kind of focusing on that every day. We have 60,000 people administering IT every day. How do we make them more powerful? That's
Yeah.
big for us. That's what we're really excited about.
Yeah, well, those are big numbers, really great numbers, and I think the whole resiliency, capacity planning, the availability, it's even like there are sessions that we have coming up at the summit, and on the sessions were kind of like bottomed up. We really kind of got a lot of the community members to voice what they needed help with. Chris, who was that? Yeah. So yeah, I think you're right on. It makes a lot of sense. And that's a really great place or a great use case for both agentic and other AI bots around automation and resiliency, capacity planning, looking at patterns that you couldn't see that might impact outages and try to avoid them. That's
Exactly.
super.
We're excited about it.
Well, yeah. Well, Chris, this is like really great. I so enjoyed, talking with you and catching up with you. Thanks so much for making the time, and being on the podcast.
No, thank you, Nick. Really, always on the contrary, really appreciate talking to you. Really appreciate your leadership with ONUG, and looking forward to the next times we're together. And thanks again for having me.
Excellent. Great. Thanks, Chris.